Hello students, figures of speech. I have already made a video on it, but then today we are revising because our next video will be on Hindi songs and figures of speech. So I will be trying to give you Hindi songs as example. But yes, today I'm just revising. I'm just making it the video on it so that uh, there will be revision, right? So we all know that figures of speech is a rhetorical device, right? That achieves the special effect by using words in a distinctive way. So figures of speech are used for making our speech more effective. Though there are hundreds of figures of speech, but here we'll focus on 20. So you will probably remember many of these terms from your English classes. Figurative language is often associated with literature and poetry in particular. Right? So, figurative language means figures of speech we use and make it more effective. Whether we are conscious of it or not, we use figures of speech every day in our own writing and conversation. So, sometime we intentionally use figures of speech, sometime unintentionally, sometime we are not aware, but then we use figures of speech because there are more than 100 types of figures of speech. So for example, common expressions such as falling in love, wrecking our brains, climbing the ladder of success are all metaphors, right? The most pervasive figures of all, that's a metaphor, is very common, and these are the examples: falling in love, right? So fall and love, so that's a fall somewhat, that is figures of speech. Wrecking our brains, climbing the ladders of success, so that's a just imagination, but we are moving to success, so that's a ladder of success. Okay. Likewise, we rely on similes when making explicit comparison: light as a feather, and hyperbole to emphasize a point: I am starving, right? So these are the figures of speech. Figures of speech are also known as figures of rhetoric or figures of style or rhetorical figures, figurative language, and schemes. So these are the synonymous phrases or words for figures of speech, right? So hyperbole, here they have given example. Why use figures of speech? What's the use of figures of speech? So using original figures of speech or figurative language in our writing is a way to convey meanings in fresh, unexpected ways. So that is when we use, so that's a writing as to convey meaning in fresh and unexpected ways, and making it more what we can say that um, more interesting, right? So they help our readers understand and stay interested in what we have to say, and they also foster creativity and depth. So then definitely there is creativity. So when we use creativity in writing, so it will be uh, more what we can say that engaging, right? So whether it is vivid metaphor, a clever smile, or a thought provoking paradox, those tools not only enhance clarity but also add layers of richness to our expression. So that will enrich our expression, right? So let us see 20 figures of speech. First is alliteration. So I usually suggest my students that this is LL. This way you can remember LL in this spelling. So the repetition of initial consonant sound, because LL is also consonant sound. So this way you can remember that's a repetition of initial consonant sound, not after, right? So then she sells seashells by the seashore, right? So then this way you can remember uh, The example is very important. So that's a all S, right? Seashells by the seashore. So first word, initial consonant sound, that is repetition of initial consonant sound. So this way, that's a L here, and this is consonant. You can remember repetition of consonant sound. Now anaphora, the repetition of same word. Here same consonant means letter. In this alliteration, that's a initial repetition of consonant means repetition of letter. But here that's a repetition of the same word. Please take care, that's a word, it's not letter or phrase at the beginning of the successive uh, clause or verse, right? So any clause or verse, there is repetition of same word or phrase. For example, unfortunately I was in wrong place, right? Wrong place, at the wrong time, on the wrong day, right? So this is a repetition of same word or phrase at the beginning of the successive clauses or verses. So that is repetition of words. You just can remember for a while. That's a repetition of word is anaphora, right? That is called anaphora. Okay. Now antithesis is juxtaposition of contrasting ideas in balanced phrases. And as Abraham Lincoln said, folks who have no vices have very few virtues, right? So here vices and virtues. So that's the juxtaposition, means this way we have to make some phrase by contrasting ideas in balanced phrase, and then it should be contrasting and it should be balanced. How? That's a and Abraham Lincoln, as Abraham Lincoln said, folks who have no vices, right? So that's a folks who have no vices have very few virtues. So if you don't have vices, means we are human being, and it is said that to err is human. So human being is full of bundle of evils, right? So then folks who have no vices have very few virtues. So that's the vices and virtues, and that's why it's an example of antithesis, right? So this is anti opposite, right? Antithesis. This way you can remember. Okay. Now apostrophe, directly addressing a non-existent person or inanimate object as though it were a living being, right? Apostrophe. Oh, you stupid car. This is non-existent person or inanimate object. You never work when I need you to, right? So that is, you are blaming car as a person, you stupid car. Another example I can give you, that if I sometimes say that my phone blackmails me when I have urgent need, right? When I'm sitting in, when I'm taking lecture, so my phone blackmails me. So then that's another example of apostrophe, right? Where uh, I'm telling about my phone as a human being or as a person, right? So that's a directly addressing non-existential person or inanimate object as living being, right? So I'm telling about my phone that my phone blackmails me, right? So that is, the phone is inanimate object, and I'm telling him like a living person. Now assonance, identity or similarity in sound between internal vowels in neighboring words, right? Identity or similarity in sound. So that's a similarity in sound between internal vowels, right? That is something to do with vowels. Please take care. Assonance is something to do with vowels. So that's a internal vowels in neighboring words, right? So similarity in sound between internal vowels. So similarity in vowels, you can remember. That is somewhat you can remember this way. That's a similarity between internal vowels, right? In neighboring words, between similarity between internal vowels. How, now, brow, right, and cow. So, ow, this is common. Ow, 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 right? So called that is called assonance. Okay. Now, chiasmus. Chiasmus is a verbal pattern in which the second half of an expression is balanced against the first, but with the parts reversed. The famous chef said people should live to eat, not eat to live. So that's a chiasmus. That's a verbal pattern. This is a kind of verbal pattern, right? Because eat, right? That's a verbal pattern. And in which the second half of the expression, this is second half of the expression, is balanced against the first, but with the parts reverse. But this part is reverse, right? How the famous chef said people should live, so that's a live to eat and eat to live, right? So that is chiasmus here. Live to eat, and this is change, verbal pattern is change, right? So here live is verb, here eat is verb, right? Eat to live. So that is in which second half of the expression is balanced against the first half, and but with the parts reversed. So that parts is live to eat and eat to live. This is the example of chiasmus. Okay. Now, euphemism, the substitution of an inoffensive term for one considered offensively explicit. We are teaching our toddler how to go potty, Bob said. That's a euphemism with substitution of inoffensive term for one considered offensively explicit. So that's the substitution of inoffensive term for one considered offensively explicit. So potty sometime, right? So inoffensive term. So that's the substitution of how to go potty, right? So this is euphemism. Okay. Now next is hyperbole. Extravagant statement or hyperbole is what is called, that's a exaggeration, right? The use of exaggerated term for emphasis on highlighted effect. So for emphasis or highlighted effect, I have a ton of things to do when I get home. So ton of things, exaggeration, ton of things to do, right? Another example, I tell you that I am very much hungry, I can eat a horse, right? I can eat whatever is available in the kitchen whole. So that is somewhat exaggeration, which is called hyperbole. Very common figures of speech, one of the figures of speech. Now, irony, the use of words to convey the opposite of their literal meaning, right? So convey the opposite of the literal meaning. Also a statement or situation where the meaning is contradicted. So meaning is contradicted by appearance or presentation of the idea. Oh, I love spending big bucks, said my dad, a notorious penny pincher, right? So here word used to convey opposite of their literal meaning, right? A statement or situation where meaning is contradicted by appearance or presentation of the idea. Oh, I love spending big bucks, said my dad, a notorious penny pitcher, right? Now next is litotes, a figure of speech consisting of an understatement in which an affirmative is expressed by negating its opposite. a $1 million is no small chunk of change, right? So that is understatement, right? So that is understatement in which an affirmative is expressed by negating its opposite. $1 million is no small chunk of change. $1 million, something very huge, or no smaller chunk, right? So that is understatement in which affirmative is expressed by negating of its. Okay, metaphor is very common. Implied comparison between two dissimilar things that have something in common. All the world's the stage, or she is my doll, right? Not like a doll, my doll. That's a metaphor. The metonymy, very important. A figure of speech in which a word or phrase is substituted by another with which it is closely associated. So that's a word or phrase, right, is substituted. Also, rhetoric strategy for describing something indirectly by referring to things around it. The stuffed suit with briefcase is a poor excuse for a salesman, the manager said angrily. So that stuff suit with briefcase is a poor excuse for a salesman. So that is somewhat rhetoric strategy of describing something indirectly by referring to things around it. So that is metonymy. The stuff suit with the briefcase is a poor excuse, right? Now, onomatopoeia, the use of words that imitate the sound associate with the object, right? So that's a imitation of sound associate with tap 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 barsa pani. So that's a tap tap is, right? Actions, they refer to the clap of thunder, right? So that's a clap of thunder. Bang went bang and scared my poor dog. So clap of thunder, right? So that is the example of onomatopoeia, right? Now, oxymoron, very common and important figure of speech in which incongruous or contradictory terms appear side by side, right? So incongruous or contradictory term by appear side by side. How? He popped the jumbo shrimp in his mouth, right? So that's a popped the jumbo shrimp, right? So that's a fish, jumbo shrimp in his, and how he can pop up, right? So he popped. So that is oxymoron. Okay. Now, oxymoron, another example is honor killing, right? So, how killing can be honor, right? Now, paradox, a statement that appears to contradict itself. So, this is the beginning of the end. So, beginning of the end. Said Ior, always the pessimist, right? So that is beginning of the end, right? Our birth is beginning of the end. Our birthday, as we born, means born to die, because one day we will die. In other example, the child is the father of a man. This way, that is also example of paradox, right? Now, personification, very common figure of speech in which inanimate object or abstraction is endowed with human qualities or abilities. So inanimate object, right? So that kitchen knife will take a bite out of your hand if you don't handle it safely. So it will cut you, it will bite you. So then the kitchen knife will bite you, we can say. So that is personification, right? When action is done by non-living thing, an action which is done by non-living thing like living thing, when we use, right? So that's a my my what we can say, that bike, my bike mm, hurt me, this way. Okay, that is okay. Now, pun, the play of words. Pun is play of words, sometimes on different senses of the same word, and sometimes on the similar sense or a sound of different words. For example, Jessie looked up from her breakfast and said, a boiled egg every morning is hard to beat, right? So that is pun. A boiled egg every morning is hard to beat. So sometimes different senses of same word and sometimes in similar. So that's a there are different. I tell you that hmm, pun, no? So that's a pun, a simple, very beautiful example in Hindi. Pani, that's a pani, moti manas choor. Pani, right now, couplet of Kabir, that's a पानी गए ना उबरे मोती माने soon something right now I tell you later, but that's a another example of pun. That's a I tell you later. Okay. Now simile. Simile is the stated comparison, the most important, most common figure of speech. That's a like or as between two fundamentally dissimilar things that have certain qualities in common. So that if definitely then we will be able to compare. So that's a Roberto Weiss white as sheet after he walked out the uh, so white as sheet, right? White as sheet. This is the comparison, direct comparison. Okay. Synecdoche figure of speech in which a part is used to represent the whole. जैसे Tina is learning her ABCs in preschool, right? So that's the ABCs means that is uh, what we can say alphabets and like a part is used to represent whole, right? So that is called synecdoche. Okay, now understatement, a figure of speech in which a writer or speaker deliberately makes a situation seem less important or serious than it is. However, situation is very serious, but then he does not use. You could say a baby Root was decent ball player, the reporter said with a wink. So that is serious issue, but it's not used as serious as it is. So that is called that is called understatement, when it is understated. Okay, so that is something I tell you. I will make another video also on it, right? So thank you so much.